Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Before we start, this is Dr. Manjua Padure. Welcome to the Centered Edge, the unfiltered edge of life and leadership clarity. Here, we dismantle performative wisdom and go straight to the fracture, the quiet crisis behind the polished life. Now, quick note before we begin, everything you hear in this podcast is for education and insight only. It's not for therapy, diagnosis, or coaching advice, and it doesn't form a professional client relationship. If it resonates, let it move you. If it stings, pay attention. This is not where you get fixed, but this is where you get free. Now, today we will be talking about clarity. If you've ever stared at a decision so long that it stopped feeling real, if your brain held board meetings that your body never agreed to attend, if your gut gave you a green light, but your fear hit the brakes, you're not indecisive, you are overridden. See, high performers don't get stuck because they're lazy. They get stuck because they've trained themselves to distrust their own knowing. We override instincts with strategy. We bury clarity under consensus. We call fear professionalism and freeze in the name of due diligence. Let me tell you a story. A client of mine, who was a global strategy lead, clinically composed, razor sharp, walked in asking for one thing. Basically told me, I need a decision model, something airtight, removes emotion, keeps me moving. But the truth is, she didn't need a model. She needed to remember her own internal compass. It was conditioned to delay, to doubt, to deter. Now, what we did together wasn't coaching, it was recalibration. Because the longer you stay in the loop of logic, the harder it becomes to hear the truth underneath it. This is in theory, it's not mindset, but it's simply a survival mechanism that you have inside you. Because what looks like indecision from the outside is often a nervous system dysregulation on the inside. If you are constantly performing clarity while privately spiraling, you're not broken. You are disconnected from your internal green light. And today, we're going to change that. Now, let's do some calling out. Let's name the pattern. Now, we call it strategic thinking, executive prudence, due diligence. But beneath the language of leadership, what we are often doing is running laps around fear. We simulate outcomes not to be prepared, but to avoid blame. We gather opinions not to collaborate, but to outsource risk. We stall not because we are wise, but because we want insulation from failure. And here's the kicker, because we are smart, we make it look good. We dress up our avoidance in credentials. We convince ourselves that our hesitation is excellence. Here's the reality, I've seen coaching hundreds of elite leaders. Most aren't facing clarity deficit. They are facing a self trust deficit, distinguished as professional discernment, and culture rewards this. The executive who takes 6 months to decide, praised for their thoroughness. The leader who trusts their guts, labeled as reckless. The analyst who can argue every angle, seen as brilliant. The one who chooses quickly with conviction, naive. But here's the wake up call. Overthinking isn't intelligence, it's the cognitive mask of fear. The longer you perform clarity instead of embodying it, the further you drift from your own truth. And after a while, you don't just doubt the decision, you doubt yourself. What if your clarity isn't missing, just muted? What if the wisdom you're hunting for in reports, mentors, and models is already sitting quietly in your chest? waiting for permission. Let's reclaim that signal. Let's talk about the neurobiology of what we need to override. Now, here's where we're going under the hood. Okay, overthinking is not a productivity flaw. It's not a mindset problem. It's not even just a habit. It's a neurobiological pattern with measurable signatures. Here's what's happening inside you. When your nervous system has been trained by years of risk management, people pleasing, or perfectionism to equate safety with control, it builds fortresses of logic to protect itself. Now, the prefrontal cortex, the home of executive function, goes into overdrive. But the amygdala, your threat detector, never shuts up. And your gut, the one system that registered truth before words, gets ignored. This is called neuroceptive dissonance. I will repeat that. This is called neuroceptive dissonance. Your body perceives an answer, but your mind vetoes it. So, what do? You think, you doubt, you spreadsheet, you plan again, you whiteboard, you intellectualize your way out of your own knowing. But instinct is not impulsive, it's a pre-verbal precision. It's pattern recognition before language. It's the body knowing what the brain hasn't processed yet. There are so many subtle nuances that happen in daily life, which takes your brain time to process because your brain functions that you register when you are actively performing thinking, it's an active action. Therefore, it takes in the data, it analyzes, you're actively doing this. But beyond that, below that, is a layer where all the subtle nuances are immediately processed at a much faster speed, which is not actively done by you. But then because it's not actively done by you, but it still comes to the surface, you don't register it, you don't buy into it. You say, oh, it's just my emotion, it's just something else going on. I need to stick to the data. See, but the truth is, clarity isn't built by stacking more data, it's revealed by removing interference. That interference is the belief that logic is more trustworthy than lived intelligence. So when this client came in saying, I need to make a decision without emotion, I didn't give her a framework. I asked her, what if emotion isn't the enemy? What if your refusal to feel it is the real block? So we didn't build strategy, we dismantled internal veto points. We rebuilt her access to signal. And when it came back, it wasn't a eureka, it was a return to her true self. Let's talk about a little bit about the somatic intelligence. Now, here's what most leadership development misses entirely. Your body is not a taxi for your brain. It's an intelligence system. Your body doesn't just walk around carrying your brain. It's an own entity and an own intelligence. Every decision you've ever made, every promotion, every pivot, every partnership was registered somatically before it was rationalized cognitively. Now, the tightness in your chest when you said yes to the wrong role, the expansion in your ribcage when you walked into the right room, the way your voice changed when you spoke about work that mattered. Your nervous system was tracking alignment or misalignment the entire time. But we've been taught to override these signals in favor of objective metrics, things that you can see on spreadsheets, that you can see on dashboards. Revenue projections over gut instinct, market research over embodied knowing, stakeholder consensus over internal compass. And slowly, incrementally, we lose access to our most sophisticated decision making apparatus. Not because it stops working, but because we stop listening. I've worked with Unicorn founders who could predict market shifts 6 months out, but couldn't tell when their own system was screaming for rest. I've coached high profile leaders who could read geopolitical undercurrents like weather patterns, very impressive, but ignored the body tension that preceded every burnout. Now, that's why I always say high performers aren't broken. They're just dysregulated, disconnected from the very intelligence that got them to excellence in the first place. Because somewhere along the way, they learned that success meant transcending the body, not partnering with it. This is the cost of over optimization. Everything is a system, everything is built in. I know because I'm in AI, everything has a protocol. You become brilliant at reading all these external systems while going deaf to internal ones. Now, let's get clear about what we're trying to achieve in this session today. You're not here to learn about another productivity hack. You're not here to download a four-step model for executive excellence. You're here because something inside you knows you've been over functioning through frameworks and protocols, and it's still not giving you peace. So here's what you're walking away with today: how to identify when overthinking isn't strategy, it's a freeze state, how to restore internal signal clarity and stop second guessing your own yes, how to distinguish clean instinct from fear based tactics. And this is one that we are all afraid of, and how to lead, not perform your decisions. So by the end of this, you won't just understand clarity differently, you'll feel what it means to be led by instinct again. Because let's be brutally honest for a second, most of your hardest decisions aren't hard because you don't know. They're hard because of what knowing might cost: the career shift, the team fallout, the image recalibration. But instinct doesn't care about optics, it cares about alignment, and you should too. Now, the minute you can stand inside that alignment with your nervous system no longer bracing, your body no longer armored, and your choices no longer filtered through fear, you'll stop needing permission to move. That's the shift we're here for. You might be wondering, okay, but how do you know this works? Let me tell you what I've seen up close in the real world. I've coached founders who later went on to IPO. I've sat with high profile executives the night before an important decision that changed their lives. I've helped executives navigate succession, scandal, and silence. And the pattern repeats. They are not short on information, they're not lacking competence. What's missing is internal permission. These are people who know how to win boardrooms, but not how to listen to their gut without self betrayal. Why? Because they've been taught to trust the model, not the moment. They were trained to trust external metrics, investor moods, performance reviews, but never the unease in the pit of their stomach, the body tension when they said yes, the way their energy collapsed after a supposedly great decision. When you've built your career on data, metrics, and framework, instinct feels dangerous because there's no deck or slide to hide behind. But here's what I've seen time and time again. The minute we stop asking, is this smart? And start asking, is this true for me? The leader shift. Their posture softens, their voice deepens, their timing sharpens because they're not dragging internal dissonance through every decision. They are aligned. And alignment beats intellect every time because that's when your truest potential is optimized, since we like the word optimized. But in order to optimize yourself and the best of you, you need to get in touch with that instinct. Now, let me take you a little bit deeper now. We are going to walk through the full arc of a client transition so you can feel what this shift looks like. Let's call her E. Now, she came into our first session sharp, grounded, competent as hell, Multinational executive, known for her grace under fire, but inside she was exhausted. She said, I need a clean framework, something rational, something that takes the weight of me, because right now I'm terrified I'll make the wrong call. She'd been stuck on a decision for over a year. Do I leave? Do I stay? Do I pivot? Do I push through? I asked her, what have you already tried? So she listed them like a shopping receipt: coaching, therapy, vision board, SWOT analysis, an intuitive healer in Bali. I mean, it's good to try all sorts of method, whatever works for you, you do you. But still no movement, because the issue wasn't clarity. The issue was permission. So I didn't give her another model. We started with her system. Session one, we tracked where her body contradicted, or where her body contracted and tightened when she thought of living, when she thought of leaving the job or whatever it is that she needed to do. Session two, we noticed how her voice softened when she talked about building her own practice. Session three, we mapped her energetic state, not her pros and cons list. And here's what we uncovered. Now, just a bit about the energetic state. It's to monitor when you feel high, when you feel low, because that's where we uncover a lot of truth. So here's what we uncovered. She wasn't afraid of failure. She was afraid of making a decision that didn't look strategic enough, afraid of losing credibility for choosing freedom over performance, afraid of stepping out of the identity that earned her approval. This is where most leaders stall, not because the future is unclear, but because the present identity is too enmeshed with success optics. So I asked her, what if clarity isn't something you find? What if it's something you remember once you're not scared to own it? By week four, she didn't need a model anymore. She stopped asking, what should I do? She started asking, what do I already know? And why haven't I acted on it yet? What came next changed everything. We're into week five now. She walks in different, not because her life had magically resolved, but because she had. She said, I'm no longer waiting for it to feel less risky. I'm waiting for it to feel real, and it finally does. What she meant was her nervous system had recalibrated to tolerate her own truth. She wasn't seeking validation. She wasn't simulating stakeholder responses. She wasn't practicing a pitch. She was ready to act. Not from pressure, not from fear, but from alignment. That week, she made the decision: resignation, new path, no panic. And here's what she told me after. That was the first decision in my entire career that didn't feel like a pitch to myself. It wasn't bravado, it was congruence. And that is the moment the leadership actually begins. Because you're no longer leading from persona, you're leading from presence. Now, this isn't just a feel good anecdote that I'm giving to you. This is a call to question your entire paradigm. Because here's the lie you've been fed: that the more frameworks you have, the better you lead. I can help you create frameworks, and I do that as part of whole guiding my clients through. But it has to be beyond just frameworks. It has to be beyond just protocols. It has to be beyond all the just the AI dashboards that I can create for you. You get that from somatic precision, which means you stop trusting only your brain, stop over relying on external language to justify your moves, and start listening to the body level signals that already knows. Because when your nervous system is stable, decision becomes quite obvious. Not easy, but obvious. Now, let's talk about let's try and understand the anatomy of internal override. Okay, so let's get granular here. Now, because understanding the mechanics of self override is the first step to dismantling it, right? So when you're in decision paralysis, you're not actually weighing options, you're managing internal conflict. So here's the pattern. Stage one is initial signal. Your system registers a clear preference, energy moves, direction emerges. Stage two, override activation. The prefrontal cortex intervenes. Wait, that's not strategic enough. What will they think? What if you're wrong? Then stage three, signal suppression. You rationalize away the initial knowing. You gather more data. You seek more opinions. And then comes stage four, which is the cognitive loop. You cycle through the same analysis repeatedly, hoping logic will deliver what instincts already offered. And then, of course, multiple loops. Stage five, system exhaustion. Decision fatigue sets in. You are not closer to clarity, you are further from your original signal. This isn't decision making, it's signal management. And the longer you stay in this cycle, the more you train your system to distrust your own intelligence. And here's what most people don't realize: the initial stage in stage one, that's already processed thousands of variables your conscious mind cannot track. It's pattern recognition at a cellular level. It's the integration of past experience, present contacts, and future possibilities, all computed in real time by your embodied intelligence. When you override that signal for more rational analysis, you're not upgrading decision making, you're downgrading it from integrated intelligence to isolated cognition, from whole system knowing to partial system processing. This is why your best decision often feels effortless, not because they required less thinking, but because they required less overriding. Now, here's the executive's dilemma between competence and congruence. So we often mistake competence for congruence. Executives, they can execute flawlessly on decisions that fundamentally misalign with their deeper knowing. And because the execution is excellent, they assume the decision was right. But competence without congruence is performance without presence. You can deliver results while abandoning yourself. You can appear strategic while feeling strangled. You can optimize everything except the one thing that matters most: your relationship with your own truth. And that truth will catch up. I've coached leaders who've built huge businesses on decisions that slowly eroded their soul, not because they were bad at their job, but because they were brilliant at executing choices their bodies never agreed to. This is the hidden cost of our override culture. We become masterful at betraying ourselves with excellence, and we call that leadership. But true leadership, the kind that sustains itself, that inspires rather than exhausts, that creates rather than depletes, requires something different. It requires you to trust your system enough to let it guide you, not blindly, but wisely, with the understanding that your embodied intelligence has access to information your analytical mind will never compute. Now, let's go in a little bit into AI, because everything I do not only has a psychological perspective to it, but always has an AI perspective to it. Because face it, AI helps us get a lot of things. It helps us monitor whatever you want to monitor about yourself. AI is actually a great assistant for self growth. Now, even in the decision making process, AI is catching up to this, not just in theory, but in how machines are learning to detect human misalignment. And this is very interesting. The most advanced leadership focused models right now aren't built just to analyze decision. They've turned to emotional incongruence. And this is something I talked about earlier in one of my posts. about how AI is becoming not just more a thinking machine, but more an emotional feeling machine. They don't just track what you say, they track how you say it and what you're suppressing while you speak. We designed um, a system for a client where it was doing just that. It was picking up data from emails, it was picking up data from meetings. So it detected a delay in word rhythm, a mismatch between vocal tone and sentence structure, a drop in breath just before you say, I'm fine. It's like, I'm fine. It's not, I'm fine. These aren't human intuitions anymore, they are machine readable patterns. AI is learning to flag what your system already knows, but your mind refuses to process. That moment you override instinct, it's no longer just a personal cost. It's a performance signal and soon a leadership metrics. Advanced neural monitoring systems are already being tested in executive coaching contexts, tracking micro expressions, heart rate variability, and vocal stress patterns to identify when leaders are operating from alignment versus override. And I do this also in my onboarding services when clients are newly in their position and they're getting used to the culture, they're getting used to the politics. And so at that time there's a lot of stress and a lot of your own unattended patterns come to the surface, and AI can help us detect that and actually address what are the causes that are stressing you up and where it doesn't sit well with you despite whatever you may be saying on the outside. So the technology exists to measure the gap between what you say and what your nervous system believes, between your stated confidence and your somatic truth, between your projected clarity and your embodied confusion. So if you're not building relationships that includes your nervous system, you'll be outrun by tools that can. Instinct isn't soft, it's strategic. And soon it'll be non negotiable because the future isn't just data driven. AI can do that. It's embodied information. AI cannot do that. So while the world builds smarter systems, you've got to build a wiser one inside yourself. So if you're afraid of AI taking over, get in touch with yourself. That's the best way. No AI can do that. No AI can make that cellular level decision that you can make. So let's stop here for a breath because this next part isn't motivational, it's more anatomical. Now, overthinking isn't a mindset flaw. It's your nervous system saying this isn't safe enough to act. It's not indecision, it's protection. Instinct isn't impulsive, it's nonlinear intelligence. Pattern recognition, your brain hasn't verbalized yet. It's the fast track writing of a system that already knows before your mind catches up. So, clarity is not cognitive, it's somatic coherence when body, belief, and behavior are aligned enough that doubt has nowhere to land. You're not stuck because you lack information, you are stuck because you've trained your system to delay movement until external applause is guaranteed. And that habit, it's a trauma response, institutionalized by systems that reward analysis over embodiment, reinforced by metrics that measured outputs, not alignment. So, how do we break it? We don't think our way out, we rewire our way through. That means you slow down until the signal is clear. You stop outsourcing your yes to LinkedIn polls and white papers. You notice when your thinking is actually fear in spreadsheet clothing. And then you anchor into this. Safety is not certainty, safety is self honor. So let me give you something tactical. Next time you're in a loop, don't ask, what's the strategic play? Ask, where my body is already in a full yes mode. Don't ask, What would they think? Ask, what part of me am I abandoning to stay chosen? Because what you call procrastination might be your nervous system stalling until permission feels safer than risk. That's not failure, that's intelligence, just misdirected. When we shift that, when we reassign instinct from threat response to leadership asset, clarity becomes a felt experience, not just a cognitive one. What about the physiology of preference? Now, we talked a lot about embodied decision making. So let's get practical about what embodied decision making actually looks like, because this isn't about following your feelings, it's about integrating multiple intelligence systems for optimal output. And that's a language that high performers would love. When you're in true alignment, when instinct and intellect are partnered rather than at war, your physiology shifts measurably. Heart rate variability increases, cortisol level stabilizes, prefrontal cortex activation balances rather than spikes, your voice drops half an octave, your posture opens, your breathing deepens. These aren't just nice side effects, they are performance indicators. Because when your nervous system isn't burning energy on internal conflict, that energy becomes available for execution. So when you're not managing cognitive dissonance, your mental resource can focus on strategic implementation. When you trust your system starts performing at a higher level. This is why aligned leaders seem to have more time, more energy, more presence than their fears. Than their peers. Not because they're working less, but because they are working more coherently, more in line with what they are feeling. That is where energy meets the body, meets the brain. Now, how do we go about this recalibration process? So, how do you actually rebuild your access to instinct? How do you rewire a system that's been trained to override itself? It's not a mindset shift, it's a nervous system practice. Step one would be system, or rather, signal recognition. Before you can trust your instinct, you have to be able to identify it. Most people think instinct is a feeling. It's not. It's information transmitted through sensation, but not emotional in nature. The difference between instinct and emotion is important to understand. Emotion has charge, instinct has clarity. Emotion wants to be felt, instinct wants to be followed. Emotion tells you about the past, instinct informs the future. It is a quiet knowing without all the self talk, without all the noise, without all the monkey brain, without um, all the feelings that are attached to it. It is just pure, quiet understanding. Then you have to, once you're able to recognize the difference, step two will be interference mapping. Once you can recognize clean signal, you map what disrupts it. The internal voice that questions your knowing, the external pressure that overrides your truth. Now, the internal voice here is your own self talk that permeates your body, but that originates from your brain. So, that internal voice, the external pressure that overrides your truth, the identity investments that make certain choices feel impossible because you need to keep a mask on. Most people try to silence the interference. That doesn't work. Even in meditation, we know this. Instead, you learn to hear interference as information about what your system is protecting. Oftentimes, it is best to do this via a coach, because someone who can help you identify the signal, who can help you also do the interference mapping. But it's something you, even if without a coach, you should attempt to try and do it on your own. You can. Now, step three would be permission restoration. This is where the real work happens. You don't need to learn to trust your instinct, you need to learn You need to unlearn the reasons that you stopped, because not everything is a positive forward action. Some things are just dismantling. So you dismantle all the things that are stopping you. So you unlearn the reasons why you stopped. What happened the last time you followed your gut and it cost you? What did you decide about instinct to keep yourself safe? What would you have let go of to trust your system again? Did you actually confuse your gut instinct to your emotions, which is a brain signal? Now, step four, integration practice. Finally, you rebuild the partnership between instinct and intellect. Not by choosing one over the other, by letting them both inform each other. Instinct provides direction, intellect provides strategy. Instinct says yes or no. Intellect figures out how and when. When they are partnered rather than competing, you get access to both speed and precision. So let me ask you clearly, where in your life are you still over explaining a decision that your body already made? Where in your leadership are you still selling safety to others while abandoning it internally? Where are you still rehearsing clarity, because real clarity would mean letting go of the version of yourself that earned applause but cost you peace? And what do you become when you stop performing answers and start embodying alignment? Not for applause, not for a perfect plan, but because your nervous system finally felt safe enough to move as a coherent signal. This is instinct, and this is strategy, and this is the future of leadership. The shift from overthinking to instinct isn't just about making better decisions, it's about reclaiming your birthright as an integrated intelligence system. Now, this wasn't just a talk. This is meant to be a nervous system recalibration disguised as a content, right? So if this stirred something in you, not hype, not dopamine, not recognition, then stop scrolling, stop pausing, stop thinking. Just pause, because this is the part where you choose. You can choose to keep looking for another model that promises to fix the stuckness, or you can begin not by doing more, but by undoing what keeps you disoriented. So, if you are a founder who's secretly exhausted by the performance of certainty, if you're a senior leader whose intuition is louder than your organizational chart, if you're a high functioning leader who's tired of being everyone's anchor while quietly drifting away from yourself, then you're not broken, you are in transition. I don't coach you into motivation, I recalibrate your system back to truth. So stop rehearsing conviction and start living it. If that's the work you are ready for, and here's where we begin. So thank you so much for this Friday morning's time, and I hope to see you all again real soon. Cheers.